Good morning, Year 3. Welcome to our writing lesson. And once again, we're going to base our writing around poetry. And it is the poem, Rathers, that we discussed in the reading comprehension lesson. So our ally today is to write own verses of a poem to describe the characteristics of an animal. Before we start, do you have a pencil or a pen and paper? And you're in charge of the pause button. Use it whenever you need to. So let's start the lesson. Now the lesson is going to start with alliteration, which I mentioned in the reading comprehension lesson. So by now you have a clear understanding of what alliteration is. So let's get started with the quiz. So alliteration, there are words that start with the same letter or sound. So let's see how well you do. So number 1, choose the words which are examples of alliteration. The old key was something with something after many years of neglect. So you need to select the two words from below. Are they smooth and wear, bright and polish, red and rust, rusty and age? Choose the two words that are examples of alliteration. Number 2, I'm only going to read the sentence. The something last night was something and something. There are 3 words that you need to select from below. I'm going to continue. If you need to pause, press the pause button and restart when you're ready. Number 3, the guinea pigs' names were something and something and something. Select the 3 words below which are examples of alliteration. Number 4, choose the words which are examples of alliteration. They had a wonderful time. Select the 3 words from down below that are examples of alliteration. Number 5, the dusty old floorboards and something as they something across the room. Select the 3 words from below. And last, number 6, the something is something something and tall in my something. So there are 4 words that you need to select below, which are examples of alliteration. And there we have it. How did you do? Shall we check the answers, or the best thing to do is if you email your answers in, I can check them for you. So let's move on to the second part of the lesson. Now we have the sound collector on the left, and it's the poem that we did the day before. And on the right we have Rathers, which is the poem that we did in the reading comprehension lesson. Now if you look at those 2 poems, they definitely visually look different. How are they different? So how are these poems the same or different? So things we need to think about when we look at a poem is maybe the length or the line length. Are the sentences or the phrases longer or shorter? Now if they are, it makes a difference to how quickly you can read the poem and the rhythm and flow that you can get going. Are the poems different or same in terms of punctuation? There's something that you'd notice very clearly about the sound collector. You may have picked up on it yesterday in regards to punctuation. And if you compare the punctuation in the sound collector to Rathers, you will notice something quite significant. Is there more punctuation in sound collector or more punctuation in Rathers? How does that make a difference to how you read the poem, or the rhythm that you can build up, or the speed that you can read the poem at? So punctuation is very important. Alliteration, we've just been over alliteration. Do these poems have alliteration in them? And why do poets use alliteration? That's something that you need to think about. Do the words sound flow better when you have alliteration? Does it give you a better understanding? So these are things that you need to think about when you're reading a poem. Onomatopoeia. Well, we've done onomatopoeia. Do both poems have onomatopoeia in them, or just one? And if it's one, which one is it? Now, verses or stanzas. Now, verses and stanzas are the same thing. Do these poems have the same number of verses? Does it make a difference to understanding the poem if one's got more verses or stanzas than the other? Are the verses or stanzas shorter or longer? If they are longer or shorter, does that make a difference to how you read the poem? Or does it make a difference to how you can understand the poem? And rhyme. We've mentioned rhyme on Monday. Some poets like to have rhyming words, and some poets don't always use rhyme in their poetry. It's not always necessary. Does it make a difference to the poem? Do you find it more interesting if it has rhyming words in it? If you're writing a poem, is it easier to write a poem with rhyming words or without? So these are things that you can think about. So here is our poem that we're going to try and reproduce in the lesson. So I'm going to go through the ally once again. In this lesson, you need to be able to write own verses of a poem to describe the characteristics of an animal. So here we have verse 3 of Rathers. I'm going to read that verse again. Or I might be a puma, a single-coloured puma, a slinking sly-foot puma, as fierce could be. And I'd wait by the waterholes where antelope drink in the cool of the morning. And I do not think that ever any antelope could get away from me. Okay, so what is the task for verse 3? Well, first of all, if we're going to try and write a verse like verse 3, you need to think of an animal that you would like to be. So take time to think about an animal that you would like to be. Of course, in verse 3, the animal is a puma. So you need to think of an animal for your verse. Next, you need to list some characteristics of your animal. Now, the puma we know is a single-coloured puma. It means it's one colour. And it has a slinking, sly foot way of moving. And it's as fierce could be. So those are simple characteristics about the puma. So think of some characteristics of the animal that you choose. Next, if we want to introduce alliteration, you need to be able to find a word that you can match with the characteristic that would create a phrase with alliteration. So if we look at verse 3 with the puma, the poets put a slinking, sly foot puma. So slinking and sly foot both start with the letter S. So you need to think about a characteristic of your animal and link it with a word that starts with the same letter as your characteristic. So we've got here in line 4, as fierce could be. Well, that's a very, very simple piece of alliteration. They're both the same word. But I think you need to try and explore even further and think about other ways of using or creating alliteration. So you could have a blue balloon, a sly, squirming squirrel, something like that. It's up to you. So think of a characteristic and match it with a word so that you can create a phrase with alliteration. Task 2 is your draft copy. So focus on creating your own version of verse 3. So follow this format. So you're just going to reproduce or copy the structure of verse 3 in the poem. So line 1, you need to start with, or I might be a, and then you choose your animal. Put your animal in that space. Line 2 is a, and you need a characteristic about your animal. And then at the end, you have the animal name. Because in line 2 of verse 3, we've got a single coloured, that's a characteristic, puma. So we've got single coloured, the characteristic, and puma is the animal. So you need to think of your characteristic and then write the name of your animal at the end. Line 3, a something, something, something. So you need alliteration and you need to write a characteristic, and I forgot to put at the end as well as the animal's name. So that line has to have alliteration, you need characteristic, and you need the animal name. Line 4, as something, and it ends with could be. So once again, you need alliteration in that phrase, and that line must finish with could be and an exclamation mark. It's going to take some thinking. That's why this is a draft copy. So think about it, use your animal characteristics and the words that you used to match the characteristics so that you could have a phrase with alliteration. Line 5, and that starts with and I'd. And you have to write on that line what the activity or the action that's taking place. What is your animal doing? Where is your animal? Line 6 starts with in the, and I've written in brackets, what time of day is this? When does it happen? Is this early in the morning, like the puma, or in the cool of the morning? Is it in the evening, at night, midnight? It's up to you to decide. It depends on your animal and what your animal is doing and where it is. Line 7 starts with and I do, so you just copy and I do. Line 8, you copy the word not, because we're just matching verse 3 of the poem. Line 9, you can put the word think. And then line 10, you end with a sentence. So in verse 3 of Rathers, the author wrote that ever any antelope could get away from me. So you can finish this verse with a sentence. Now, some people may prefer to do lines 7 to 10 differently. So you can finish off your verse in a different way if you prefer. You don't have to do lines 7 to 10. It's up to you to choose. So task 3, if you have time, make a final copy with an illustration. And then you're done. And I will therefore look forward to seeing your work when you email it to yr3@grange.harrow.school.uk. So that's SCH and not the word school. But thank you very much for listening and watching. I look forward to seeing your work. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.